All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Dennis Schultz. I am the Executive Director for the Blacks in Technology Foundation. If you guys aren't familiar with Blacks in Technology, I'll post a link in the chat. But basically, we are a nonprofit that advocate for the promotion and inclusion of people of African descent in the tech industry. And today we have Jim, who is going to be talking to us regarding imposter syndrome. And if you are like me, I think everybody kind of has, a little self-doubt every now and then. And imposter syndrome is real. I can attest to it. No matter how educated or informed or employed you are, you always have that nagging feeling in the back of your brain if, you're doing enough, or if you are enough, or, the people on your team or in your company are better or more advanced than you are. So, you're not alone. So with that, I am going to hand off to Diana. Diana, welcome. I'll let you introduce the team because there's so many and I don't want to miss anybody.
Yes, definitely. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So my name is Diana O'Bivery.
And I'm Natalie Grandy, and we are both part of the recruiting team here at GEM.
We are super excited about this conversation today about imposter syndrome and to have our very special guest from GEM answer questions for all of you. Here with us, we have Georgena Frazier, who is a recruiter and recruiting program manager, Darwin Irby, who is our sales operations analyst, Alem Abai, who's an account executive on the team, Katarina Makmuri, who is a product manager, Dmitri Brereton, and Sandi, who are both software engineers at GEM. Tanner Christensen, who is our head of design, and Temi, Vasco, who is our controller at GEM. Now I'm going to pass it over to them to go ahead and introduce themselves. Gigi, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'd love to. Good morning, everyone. Pronouns are she and they. I go by Gigi, but my real name is Georgena. I began my career as a PM for a nonprofit before moving over to styling hair, and then moving into the tech space to help people, right? To help people connect to meaningful work. I'm also on the recruiting team. And now I get the fantastic opportunity to work as a recruiting program manager here at GEM, and pumped to continue this conversation with our wonderful panelists.
Hey everyone, I'm Darwin, sales operations analyst here at GEM. I moved out to the Bay Area about 2 years ago. It doesn't even feel like it's been that long. It feels like it was just yesterday, actually. But yeah, I worked in tech in Atlanta and for several different high-tech companies, anywhere from like just regular sales to doing some program and project management work over the years. And so now I moved out to the Bay with the hopes of, breaking into the tech even further. And honestly, I ended up at an event when I was looking for a job and I ended up running into Gigi, and that's how I ended up at GEM. And so I met everyone on the team and they were amazing. And so that's how I ended up here. And it's been pretty good so far.
Thanks, Darwin. Hi, everyone. I'm Katarina. I'm a product manager at GEM. And I've been in product management for several years now, but I actually graduated with an environmental science degree and I started out in sales. So I have to say breaking into tech after graduation was months of rejection and honestly greasy haired depression. And that experience has made discovering undiscovered talent a true passion of mine. So I love my work here at GEM.
I'm Sandi. I'm a software engineer. Like Katarina, I have a different sort of background. Actually, I have a degree in civil engineering, so engineering, but not quite the same. And honestly, it wasn't until I moved to the Bay Area and America in general, I guess, that I realized that software engineering was even a career option for me. And so fast forward a few years, during which I graduated from a software engineering bootcamp, and here I am at GEM, which is actually my second software engineering role now.
I'm Tanner Christensen, head of design here at GEM. I have worked at a lot of different companies here in the San Francisco area before joining GEM, companies like Facebook, Lyft, Atlassian. I've done a lot of different things over the years, built a lot of web apps and a lot of other things like that. So really excited to be here with this panel.
I'm Dmitri, I'm a software engineer here at GEM. I did a computer science at UCLA. I did a few internships while I was there, graduated in 2019. After that, I worked on some of my own projects for a year. Then I started job hunting during the beginning of a pandemic, which was really fun. And happily, I ended up at GEM in the end.
Hi, everyone. I'm Temi. I'm the controller at GEM, and I've been in accounting and finance for almost 15 plus years. And I started out in auditing with KPMG. And I was there for about 3 years before I went into industry practice. And that started a long line of moving from one industry to the other, including oil and gas. I've been in chemical manufacturing, electricity generation, real estate development, and finally tech in the last 3 years. I was gemmed, as they say, and I haven't looked back since.
Hey everyone, my name is Alem, Abai. I'm an account executive here at GEM. And this is actually my first role in tech. So I've been with GEM for almost 2 years now, but prior to that, I worked in the fitness industry for like over 6 years. And my education is actually in public health. So definitely, you know, exploring this first career in tech, I have the imposter syndrome is real. So really excited to just chat with everybody here today.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And thank you all for joining this conversation. Some of you might know imposter syndrome is something that is quite common, especially in the workplace. And those that are suffering from it really tend to have a sense of inadequacy or insecurity about their ability to contribute, especially when you're first starting your career, which is something that's not often talked about. And we're here to try and normalize by having this conversation and just making it a little bit more public. So the first question I want to start for the panelists is, what can you all tell me about your experience starting off in your career and why you decided to be part of this conversation today? And Sandi, I'm actually going to have you kick us off.
Sure thing. So I was actually really fortunate to find and work for companies that gave me really excellent learning environments and really supportive peers and mentors. But sort of like I mentioned, like I came out of a boot camp, I had various careers and jobs before software engineering. So it was definitely a little bit intimidating to come in with not a lot of exposure to tech beforehand. So I didn't really always know what to expect. But I personally found that having conversations with both peers and mentors about imposter syndrome really helped me. And realizing that almost everyone goes through dealing with imposter syndrome, some more frequent than others. And so I really just wanted to pay it forward and be part of the conversation today.
Dmitri, do you actually have anything to add here?
Yeah. For my path, throughout my life, I tried learning to code many times and gave up every time because it felt way too hard and nothing made any sense. And eventually near the end of high school, I finally figured it out and learned how to build something. But still, like going into UCLA, there were people who had been coding since they were really young, and it was like quite intimidating environments. Like I felt very behind everyone else, and I felt like I was faking it, like they were the real coders, and I was just like kind of pretending to be one of them. And only a while later did I learn that there was a name for this concept of imposter syndrome. And yeah, I wish I had learned about it earlier because it definitely is something that affects everyone. So I'm really happy that we're here discussing it for all of you.
I love that, Dmitri. I also did not know what that concept was of imposter syndrome until about 6 years into my career. So hopefully we can start to have these conversations earlier and earlier. Tanner, would actually love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I feel like I've had some level of imposter syndrome throughout my entire career, mostly stemming from the fact that I am self-taught. I didn't go to school for any of the work that I do or any of the things I know. I dropped out of high school at a very young age and ended up just teaching myself how to design, then ended up teaching myself how to program, teaching myself how to build products and market them and things. And I think a result of that was I ended up working alongside a lot of people who did have formal training or a lot of formal experience and good networks. I ended up working with people who knew all the lingo of design or knew how to actually build an application without doing spaghetti code and just messing things up. So I feel like I've always kind of had that imposter syndrome. But at the same time, I feel like that's been a strength for me. So hopefully we'll talk about this a little bit later. In that it's enabled me to not be afraid to try things and not be afraid to dive in, even if I don't know something. And specifically why I want to talk here today, this group of people are some of the best people I've ever worked with in my entire career. And knowing that we all feel imposter syndrome and seeing how we overcome it is really empowering. Like I'm head of design, I manage a team. I'm learning a lot from every single on this panel.
I love that. Temi, anything to add from your experience?
Well, I started out, I moved here when I was 17, so it's a totally different culture. And once I got my diploma, barely printed, I signed up with the Big Four, and, you know, talking to C-suite executives where you have to be very well spoken, direct, assertive, and know your stuff, right? You can't really have that room to make mistakes, or at least I felt that way. And it was quite intimidating, I have to say. And even there were so many times where my answers were, I don't know, especially in an environment where you always felt like you couldn't make a mistake because you're a consultant. So you're the person that they're paying to give an opinion. And if your opinion is wrong, you've impacted not just yourself and your team, but a whole company, you know? So it felt really, really weighty. And so in that environment, I did lose confidence in myself rapidly. And looking back, I can see the mistakes I made. I can see all the things that I could have done to mitigate it. I didn't have a name for imposter syndrome at that time. I just thought I had a lot of anxiety, and I doubted myself so much. But knowing what I know now, I'm hopeful that, you know, if I can help other people avoid the mistakes I made or learn and never have to make them, happy to share.
I love that. Darwin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think starting out in my career, I graduated with a degree in sociology, so it had nothing to do with tech. And, you know, getting out of college, the first thing you do is try to find a job. And I've always kind of been interested in tech. I started like building computers and playing video games. I've been tech adjacent for the most part. And so getting into sales was kind of overwhelming, being since it's all business related and it could be very complex. And so I literally did not feel like I was able to do my job. So like that was like kind of how I started my career out. And so that's why I wanted to be a part of this conversation today, is just to talk about how I kind of overcame some of those things, and also like how anyone else coming from a non-traditional background can end up in tech and do great things here as well. So yeah.
I love that. Alem?
Yeah, I think similar to Darwin, when you transition from like a non-traditional background into tech, at least for myself, I had a lot of insecurities and a lot of moments where I'm questioning myself, and it's like, what am I even doing here? Like, how did they hire me? Like, how did I get past this interview process? But just really, like, for me, you know, this group here actually, you know, a few people in this group have been my support system. And, you know, when you have like that support to lean on and say like, hey, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing, and feel vulnerable enough to like share how you're feeling, and you have that support system to lift you up, I think that makes such a huge difference. And for me, just being able to lean on others and share experiences has really helped me feel a lot more confident in my career. And then being able to share that with others who are feeling the same way, I think it's super impactful, and has, you know, helped me grow a lot in my own personal development and my career.
I love that. And Gigi, I'd love to hear what you think.
Of course, definitely plus one to what everyone else said. You know, my degree's in psychology, and I feel like I use that thing every day. The research skills, the advanced social skills that I gained in that career has really been helpful with overcoming imposter syndrome. And another good thing that I want to echo that everyone else has said is definitely to like make sure that you have like different pods of support systems, right? So like one pod is like your positive folks. So like one of those folks in that group is my dad, right? Like no matter what I do, he always says it's great, right? Even when I was a hairstylist and braiding and cutting hair in the worst way, like he always told me they were, you know, they were really good. And so another pod is, you know, folks that challenge you, who, you know, can check your ego. And another group is like mentors and sponsors, right? And so like sponsors and mentors are folks that maybe a little bit more like senior in their career, right? And can like help you along your journey. And then the last thing is just remembering that this is like a continuous process and like a lifelong journey, and it never ends, especially if you plan on like staying in tech and continuing to like up-level your skills.
Thank you all for sharing. Plus one to dads being the #1 supporter. My dad is my #1 supporter as well. So plus one to you, Gigi, for that mention. Next question. So when did you first realize that you were experiencing imposter syndrome in your career? Or what triggers your imposter syndrome or triggered your imposter syndrome in your career? Katarina, would love for you to start off for us.
Oh yeah, sure thing. I mean, a lot like Dmitri, it was the moment that I heard the term imposter syndrome that I knew that I had imposter syndrome. And, fortunately, everyone who's attending today is now familiar with the term, and we can put a name to the face, a face to the name. Anyway, it's it's just like what Dennis was saying as well. Just this feeling that everyone else in the room must know so much more than you. So that can crop up when as simple as something as working on a new project where you don't know something, especially if you're going to be starting at a new job, especially if you're going on in the interview and people are asking you hard questions and literally judging everything that you're going to say. It's super hard to keep your chin up in those kinds of situations.
How about you, Sandi?
Yeah, I mean, I think Katarina hit the nail on the head. Like for me, it rears up anytime there's like a change in job, a new project, sort of like once you step into that like outside of your comfort boundaries just a little bit, that's when it rears its head for me. And yeah, like everyone mentioned, I didn't realize it was imposter syndrome until I put a name to it, right? And that first sort of job search, looking for that entry level tech role, that was when it really hit for me. Even as I was being successful, as I was getting past these interviews, I was like, wait, they're gonna actually pay me to do this job? Are you sure? So that's, yeah, I think it goes back to like, that's why it's important to have these conversations and just acknowledge when the feeling arises that, okay, I'm experiencing imposter syndrome.
It's +1 to acknowledging. I always even with Natalie, I'm always talking to her about imposter syndrome. I feel it like it's coming. Do you think this is what I'm going through right now? And so she's been my greatest support as well. Dmitri, how about you?
Yeah, I have like a short story on this. So during my first year, a lot of people around me were getting internships and I felt like I was really far behind. But it's super hard to get an internship as a freshman. But these people were all so experienced that they could do it anyway. So I tried hard, I learned as much as I could, applied everywhere and still got nothing. And then near the end of freshman year, I attended a NSB conference and there was a hackathon there that I ended up winning, which got the attention of one company and I eventually interviewed with them and got an internship there. And then during my second year, I was part of a fellowship program for people of color in tech called Code 2040. And you would go through their technical interviews and you'd do on-sites with their partner companies. If you got a job with them, then you were a fellow. And then at some point in my journey at UCLA, someone said something to me that I have not forgotten since. They said, I wish I was Black so I could have an easier time getting a job. And my reaction to that was not even to be offended, but more like, because I was just so much in this imposter syndrome mindset, I was more like, wait, are they right? Like, is that why I got these jobs? Like, am I an imposter after all? And I think like, yeah, this is just something that really needs to be said. As a minority in tech, you're kind of in a lose-lose situation because if you get the job, then it's because you're a diversity hire. And if you don't get the job, it's because minorities aren't that skilled. So no matter what you do, like you're just going to be in this situation and it's probably going to be a thing that feeds your imposter syndrome that you have to deal with.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dmitri. Temi, how about you? What?
I would say for me, the triggers are always linked to some kind of change in my environment. Whenever I was changing industries, accounting sounds basic, but every industry has its own specialized form of accounting, and there's all these little quirks that you have to learn. Every single time I changed industry, it was always, oh my God, how am I going to do this? Do I even know what I'm doing? It's like starting from scratch all over again. And I would have that constant anxiety, with me. Other times it's getting pushback, not really pushback, but I'm such a big picture person. I love designing big systems and all that. And when I get asked questions about the details, I'm like, wait, maybe I didn't think it through. Maybe I should just scrap it and I have to start from the beginning all over again. And so those are the little things that I realized just made me worry and make me anxious. And now I know it's imposter syndrome, right? Because now all of a sudden I have this self-doubt, even though it has nothing to do with me and everything to do with the environment or the work I'm doing or trying to find a solution or a better solution. But those are the things that really trigger me, and not having answers. I like to problem solve. So if someone comes with a problem and I don't have the answer, oh my gosh, it's so frustrating. But at the same time, sometimes they don't even want me to have the answer. They just want to share the problem. But I've gone to this whole deep end where I'm like, oh my God, why are they even asking me? I do nothing. So I think the last one I would say would be data overwhelm. I've realized over time, a lot of information coming at me very quickly is too much. I need time to process. And I didn't know that about myself when I started. And so in an environment where everyone is so quick to process and answer questions or ask the right, being an introvert and moving a little differently the way other people did made me doubt myself. Now it's something that I see as actually, it helps me because I'm never in a rush. I always want to do it right. I want to get it. So it helps later. But initially, when I'm comparing myself to my peers, it made me feel like, oh my gosh, I'm definitely in the wrong profession. What the heck am I doing here? But those are the things that I've found, even till today, still triggers that imposter syndrome for me.
Thank you for sharing that, Temi. Gigi, how about you?
Totally. So I experience imposter syndrome on most days. I must be a glutton for punishment or something. But, I think it's because I try to push myself to learn something new each day, right? Like whether that's reading like a scientific article, right? Where I don't understand all of the words. It always kind of, imposter syndrome always kind of like pokes its head up. And, to combat this, I try to use sticky notes to remind myself, to keep doing the hard work of learning, right? Like learning how to solve really challenging problems, as well as power posing. I had to do some power posing even before this conversation. And then, it's really wild that like I continue to experience imposter syndrome because I've done so many different things throughout my career that you would think that I would just like at some point get over it. But, reminding myself that like imposter syndrome is something that I probably will always experience as I'm on this journey of constantly learning. And also to see it as like a signal that I'm moving in the right direction has been super helpful with overcoming it.
Gigi, can you elaborate on what a power pose is?
It is anything that makes you feel powerful. So I like the hands on the hips. I like the showing my muscles, because I'm doing push-ups. I like the prayer pose. I like the hands on my heart pose, the hands on my head pose. Those are just some of mine. Thanks, Tanner.
I love it. Love it.
I am good.
Does anyone else want to share about what has triggered their imposter syndrome in their career? Love to hear from any of you. Alem?
I knew you were going to call on me, Diana. Yeah, I think like similar to Temi, for me, what like typically triggers my imposter syndrome is change. And I think I saw a question in the chat earlier from the audience about like, hey, like how does it feel when you are feeling imposter syndrome and you're not in a supportive environment? And that resonated with me. My last career, like I mentioned, I worked in the fitness industry and I got promoted into a management position at a really young age. And I looked around and all of my counterparts were white males that were like 10 to 20 years older than me. So I felt imposter syndrome really bad. I felt like, how did I get this position? Like, I just didn't feel like I knew what I was doing or that I wasn't qualified for some reason. It's just that self-doubt. And I felt like I didn't have anybody to go to because all of my counterparts like couldn't relate, we just didn't have that type of like environment where we could like speak openly about these things. And I had to take, I had a few breakdowns. Like I just, I felt like, maybe this isn't for me. I should leave. And I had to be vulnerable and open up to my leader at the time and just explain like, hey, like, this is how I'm feeling. Like, I don't think that this is the right role for me. And he had to like sit down and have an open conversation and be like, listen, like there's a reason that I promoted you and not these other counterparts like around you, right? Like you have these skills. This is why like you're going to be so successful in this role. And I really had to like hype myself up and like build my self-confidence, and just kind of put my head down and do the work and kind of try to quiet the noise of like everyone around me that I felt like was like waiting for me to fail, right? And it could have been all in my head, but that's how I felt. And I was just able to push through, but sometimes you just have to like open up and be vulnerable and share how you're feeling, and hopefully, you know, you get that support back. And if not, like lean on, like Gigi was saying, lean on your pods, like whether it's your family or a group of friends, you know, that helped me a lot.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Alem. All right, and we can go ahead and move on to the next question. Natalie?
Yeah. So many talk about the importance of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset when overcoming imposter syndrome. So I'm curious what steps you've all taken towards overcoming your own imposter syndrome with this mindset, and who was your support when talking about this feeling of imposter syndrome? And I'd love for one of the panelists to actually jump in. I know there's a lot of great thoughts here.
Yeah, I can quickly jump in here. I always feel like for me, like starting out, like doing sociology and then kind of just jumping right into tech. One of the things that like helped me in regards to like feeling like I could be good at my job is being a forever learner, right? So like I'm a huge proponent of having like a growth mindset. To me, it was one of the more helpful ways of combating imposter syndrome, especially when maybe the people around you aren't necessarily super helpful to you. One of the ways that I would do this is like just constantly like keeping up to date with all of the technology that was happening around me, not just the stuff that I was selling, but all of the adjacent things around it. So when I would go to have technical conversations with different IT managers and directors and VPs of technology, I would be able to speak the same language as them. And sometimes it would become a little bit surprising to them that I spend so much time, energy, and effort in doing that. And ultimately, it commanded respect. And I think that once I started feeling like I was getting that respect by growing, that's when I started combating that imposter syndrome just time over time, you know, just constantly trying to make myself as sharp as I can. So when anything would come my way, I could be able to slice through all of that like imposter syndrome and feeling like I can't do this anymore. So that was just my take when I started out my career and how I deal with it today.
And that term growth and like learning, I mean, that's really what it's all about, right? Just acknowledging I'm here to learn. Hey, this is something I don't know, but I'm going to be able to learn it. Like just because I don't have confidence now doesn't mean that I won't ever have confidence in it. And something that helps me too is sort of like taking a second to reflect back. Like, where was I 3 days ago, 3 months ago, 3 years ago? And hey, I've made a lot of progress. There's nothing to stop me from continuing that progress.
So I would say for me, there was one person I had in my first job that was a huge advocate for me, not just with other people, but in challenging some of the assumptions that I made about myself, or even, you know, I love to laugh. So there's a lot of self-effacing humor that, you know, we will use to kind of cover up, or I would use to cover up a discomfort or anxiety. And she would call me on it in a kind way, never in public, but she would ask me, you know, where's that thought coming from? You know, that doesn't sound really kind. You are not those things. This is how I see you. And having that feedback on a constant loop with her was really helpful in changing my mindset, and making me realize that sometimes when I talk about myself, I'm talking about myself in a way that's not positive. And you should be your own biggest advocate in the workplace, anywhere else. But in the workplace, you should at least believe in yourself, and be able to say what the positives, you know, what you bring to the table. Another thing that, and I think Sandi mentioned this, and Darwin as well, is investing in study, research. Google might be the first place, but if you know people, find books, any kind of resource. Podcasts are huge now. So if you're not into reading books, you might find a podcast that will actually explore, you know, the industry that you're looking at or the area of work that you want to work on. Learn from all these people who have done amazing things so that you can kind of give yourself a shortcut. You can get there a little bit faster, right? So you don't have to go through all the pain they did to get to where they are. And the last thing I would say is networking. If I find someone that's smarter than me, that knows more than me, I want to know them. If I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room. You know, it's one of those things where I love learning from people who have been there, they've done that. Or even if they're not even in my industry, it might be something related to self-talk. It might be psychology, GD. It might be something absolutely not related to accounting, but they know these things and they have an in-depth knowledge and a skill that I don't have. And so talking to them, asking questions and giving back, right? So you're not just taking, but whatever you do know, share it, teach it. And those things actually help you, right? If you teach a class in something, you know a lot about it by the end of the class, a lot more than you would know at the beginning. And so those are the things that have helped me when I was going through imposter syndrome. But having a pod, having that support system, I cannot overstate enough how important that is, whether it's in the workplace or outside of it. Finding allies in your new job, that takes time, but being just open to that idea is the first step.
I love all these stories. It makes me wonder if like imposter syndrome actually is the wrong label for us all to be using. Like it really is just about being new. You're new. You don't know something, and you're in a space where you recognize that you don't know something, and it's really hard and scary to move forward through that. So it's less that you're an imposter and more that you just have space in front of you. And I think that's where the growth mindset comes into play. Is you have to have some level of faith or confidence that you can grow and you can improve, that you have the capacity to learn something new and try it. And I think part of the challenge, at least in my career, has been you have to acknowledge, sometimes very openly and publicly, that you've made mistakes, that you don't have all the answers, that you're new and you're learning. I think that's just like the best way to move forward, is acknowledge that, hopefully have some support, and then go forward.
Hope is the antidote to fear.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. So, you know, does anyone want to add any other tips onto how they are working towards overcoming imposter syndrome? I know Gigi mentioned power pose. I know we all talked about support systems. Like, what are other ways that we could help in overcoming imposter syndrome?
I have this plaque right here that says, perfection is not the goal, progress is. That is a daily reminder that I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to get it right every time, but if I can learn from it, I'm better off.
I want to highlight that as well. I think Sandi said something around the lines of like checking in regularly on your progress and how you are growing and things you're learning. Sandi, I don't know if you have like a method you use, like journaling or like screenshotting your progress or something that you can share with the team on how you track your growth day over day.
Honestly, no, it sort of varies. Sometimes it's just all in my head. I'll sit back and have a reflection. Sometimes it is browsing over like my tasks, or even sometimes my own LinkedIn. I'll have a look and be like, oh yeah, I did all of these things. So yeah, no one particular method, sort of just whatever works for me, or whatever method, or I don't know what the word is, environment that I want to get in that day to remind myself.
Yeah, I feel like also one thing that I realized is that it's sometimes helpful to see how people view you. Because I think that we have this weird thing where we don't always see ourselves in the best light. And if you would ask some of your colleagues and peers and friends how they actually view you, you'd be really surprised at like how much they admire you. And I think that gives me personally a little boost of confidence every time I talk to people that, you know, I interact with on a day-to-day basis. So I would try that out.
That's a helpful one. Diana and I often have those conversations daily, and it turns into just this big moment of sharing how well each other's doing and being each other's champions. And that goes alongside finding, you know, these pods of individuals that you really lean on and know you and know how to challenge you. So I love that point, Darwin.
Someone in the chat left a comment saying it's part of this is fake it till you make it. I want to call that out and say, I don't think that's true. I don't think you have to fake it. I think you can show up authentically in your honest self and say, I don't know this. I'm going to figure it out. So you don't have to fake that you know something. You can just show up and say, I don't know it. And to Darwin's point, the best way you're going to learn that is by talking with other people, asking them, where are my gaps? Where do you think I can improve? Help me out as a friend. And you can learn from there, but you don't have to fake it. You can just be honest with yourself. I don't know.
I'll push back a little bit. There is an element of faking it, and I dislike that word, but I see it more as trying to be objective or put in away your emotions to get the job done in that moment. Like you might be feeling anxious or worried, whatever is going on, but there's a level of compartmentalism that you have to compartmentalize when you're at work for a minute. Like, okay, whatever it is I'm feeling, put that aside. Let me focus on this for now. So you might think, okay, that's faking it, but really, again, that's why I have an issue with that word. But it's really just projecting confidence when you don't necessarily feel it, right? But again, I do agree with what you said though, Tanner. You can project that confidence and still say, I don't know it yet. I haven't got to it yet. We haven't found that solution, but we're working on it right now. So you can still be authentic, but I think, especially as a leader, communicating your anxiety is helpful for a team that knows you. With a new team, that is a scary thing for the people on your team. So using wisdom in those moments and being able to still get through it, even if you're not feeling that confidence or you still feel like an imposter, I think is still helpful. But you still have to do the work, right? You still have to go back and face those issues and demons, hopefully on your own time.
Yeah, I think this is really related to that conversation about growth mindset. One way to reframe that phrase, fake it until you make it, like you want the confidence until you make it. You want to figure it out until you make it. So you don't know it, but you will figure it out. And that's something that you can do.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. Like, first of all, I think we're all in agreement here. It sounds like, and I think part of it is when you show up authentically and you say, hey, I'm really anxious about this, or I'm scared, or I don't know, followed by, I'm gonna figure it out. People, I think, may look at you in a little bit more positive light for a few reasons. One is that you're admitting, I don't know something, but I'm gonna go figure it out. I'm gonna get through this anxiety. I'm gonna be confident, right? And the second part is you kind of set yourself up to be a little bit of an inspiration, someone that others can follow. If they see that you don't know something, but you're going to push forward anyway, that tells them that maybe they can also not know something and push forward, particularly as a leader, but also just anyone. Again, so many people on this panel I admire greatly for the work and the career paths that they've taken. And I think if I didn't know about the imposter syndrome some of these people had, I would just have assumed they are the experts in the field. So I think part of it is just admitting, I'm scared, I don't know, I'm anxious, I'm having a hard day, but I'm going to figure it out.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for sharing all of this. It's been great. Now we would like to hear from the audience. So if I see some questions here in the chat already, please continue to submit them. I'm going to start off with something from Jennifer. I feel like making mistakes is part of growing and learning, and feeling doubt is a totally human thing. I wonder if perhaps it's the environment system itself that doesn't create the psychological safety or a space to take risk, especially for Black, Indigenous, people of color. Is it tech and the cultures built across the industry that need to change? We'd love to hear people's thoughts.
I do think, yes, there is an element of change that needs to occur in the industry, but I don't think that issue is unique to the tech industry. I don't think it matters what space you're in. You will always have that level of doubt. You'll always have that pushback because you're an unknown person. They don't know you yet, right? Especially when you're new to a company, you're new to an industry. Change, anytime there's any kind of change, there'll always be that. And as a person of color, I think we also carry a lot of weight with us when we enter into certain spaces. We're not just representing ourselves, we're representing everyone else that will follow, right? So you want to set that precedent of not just excellence just for your own reputation, but for other people of color that will work in that environment. And I think our mindset is always to do the best we want to do. We might not be able to initiate change everywhere, but I do think having those conversations and being direct when we do feel that is important. Part of it is our mindset, I think. The other part is just the world at large. I wasn't raised here, so my perspective might be a little bit different. What I've found though is if I can't change the environment I'm in, I can either change my mindset or I can find a new environment. It sounds a little cut and dried, but that's really what it comes down to.
I agree with you, Temi. I have also had instances where I would say, you know what, I'm going to go change my environment. Like, I'm not going to just sit here and continue to take something that I do not really necessarily have to take. Another question we have in here, it sounds like you all work in a super supportive environment. Thank you. Have any of you had to deal with imposter syndrome in an environment that is not supportive? I know Alem shared her story. Does anyone have similar stories of a not supportive environment?
Look at us all thinking. I mean, I think that there's always shades of support. So sometimes you can be in a supportive company, but have an unsupportive team. Maybe you can have a supportive team in an unsupportive company. I think in the cases where you don't feel like you can trust anyone, you do need to start to look outside of that unsupportive environment for trusted individuals. But I think also you might be surprised by the one-on-one connections you can make in the unsupportive environment. Definitely in a group environment, probably not the best time to say, I don't know how to do something if you feel like that's going to be taken badly. Sometimes that actually is taken better than you might expect, but you can always test the waters out in a one-to-one relationship. Maybe you can just share like, hey, have you heard about imposter syndrome? Does that resonate with you? That can be a really good way to start opening up a conversation and talking about this feeling. And if that person does respond in kind, that is one way where you can begin to figure out how vulnerable you can be around these people and how much you can open yourself to growth.
Anyone else want to add?
I'll add one thing. I have worked in unsupportive environments before, and I have had serious anxiety. There were days where I would wake up and I would not want to go into work. You have to understand how much I like what I do to know how bad it had to get to wake up and not want to do that. But in those instances, and I did end up choosing to leave the company. I don't think that's always the solution. Looking back, I wish I had been confident enough to talk to the people around me about how I was feeling and what my triggers were. But I had a really hard time communicating even what I was feeling. I don't know if that makes sense. Like I was so anxious, I couldn't even map out why I was anxious because I had let it get to a point where I was all up in my feelings, if that makes sense. And it was no longer about the work, which is, I find to be helpful, right, in giving me focus. And looking back, I do wish I had gone to my boss and said, hey, I'm struggling. I'm having a really hard time. And these are the things that is really in the way of me getting my work done. I would have anxiety about missing deadlines. I'm so deadline oriented. It's like, oh my God, I'm gonna miss the day. Whereas looking back now, I could have literally just said, this is not going to happen. I have to have a life outside of work. I need more balance in my day. Can we miss this deadline? Or can we shift things around? I could have asked, but I never even felt confident enough of my place there to make those requests. And so I would say if you're not if you're in that kind of environment, finding an ally, someone to bounce the ideas off of. It's not within your group or team, outside of your team. I've had a coach that has helped me to communicate better, like really to map out, this is what's happening. These are the reasons why I feel anxious about these. And these are the things that are in the way of me meeting whatever my goal is, and communicating much earlier. So instead of waiting until it's up to here, when it's just a little bit, nipping those things in the bud, like, I really didn't appreciate, you not supporting me in the meeting. This is the reasons why this is how I outline my thoughts. And I would have appreciated you giving me feedback in private as opposed to in front of the team. Really short, really sweet, but I didn't have the words then. Now I do, right? So it's a process. Just be patient with yourself and remember that in the end, I believe things happen for a reason. I've learned all these things because I had all these horrible experiences and I can now share them. But if you can, the first step is just to speak up. Speak up even if you're not sure what the outcome is going to be. But I can assure you that anxiety you're feeling, you'll feel better. Even if the outcome isn't exactly what you wanted, just having that confidence to speak up in that moment is a huge deal when you have imposter syndrome. So just start small, but start soon as you can.
Thank you so much for that, Temi. Next question that we have in here is, can someone speak to how they use industry resources to hit the ground running when switching work environments?
I actually really want to jump in on this one. I think that this is a common thing. We talked about how imposter syndrome gets triggered when we're switching a new job. And what we all want to do is we want to figure everything out so that when we start on that first day, we can answer everything. And actually, I would really advise you to study yourself, to know yourself. And I know that sounds super cliche. Of course, you can brush up on whatever area that you want to grow in, but you were hired to that specific position because you have strengths, and you should know your strengths, so that when you are starting off in your role and people are wondering, how can this person contribute to the work that we're doing, you know very well what those areas are.
Anyone else want to add on?
I think for me personally, like a great place for where I started was on LinkedIn, actually. I started when I switched like industries and switched careers in a sense. I just started connecting with random people on LinkedIn that I thought like, oh, hey, I could learn something from this person. Like, let me send them a connection request. At first it was weird, but I think that like a lot of this doubt is in your head and you think, oh, what is everybody thinking of me? I think everybody has a feeling of that. And really everybody just wants to be able to connect and learn something from each other. So I started connecting with random people. I think one person I remember is this person. His name is Simon Tekle, and I saw his name and I could tell that he was Eritrean, which is what I am as well. And he was like a sales leader. And I thought, oh, that's great. I'm an account executive. Like, I want to learn from him. I connected with him. We started a conversation and he told me about this resource. It used to be called, I believe, Sales Brother and Sisterhood, but it changed to Sales for the Culture. Is a Slack group with just like hundreds of folks in there that were in the same position that I was in, being in sales, being a minority person of color. And there was just tons of resources, whether it's like ways to further your education, if there's ways to just like connect about, hey, I have a job interview coming up, like, I don't know what to talk about, like resources there. And just like this community that I had no idea existed. And that helps support me a lot. And it's a way that you can like, that give and take where you're getting so much information and you can also share and give back and hopefully help others. And just by joining that group, I've been able to connect with folks that were like, hey, like, I want to break into tech. Like, how do I do so? And you just build all these relationships. So I think that like LinkedIn can be a great place to start. And I know that there's so many resources out there, but sometimes it's hard to find, like, where do I even find these resources? So just know that like, that there's people out there that are strangers that like are willing to help and want to help you succeed.
That's really true. Can I jump in?
Go for it, Gigi.
So before I start a new job, I definitely make a therapy appointment. Not only do I have a therapist, or not only do I have a coach, I also have a therapist. And sometimes it's just kind of helpful to talk through the anxiety that you're feeling about starting a new job. Is hard, right? I always try to read the first 90 days. That's been pretty helpful. And to echo something that Katarina said, it's been really helpful for me to learn how I learn. And to be really honest about that, right? And so I'm like very tactical, very hands-on. That's why styling hair was really awesome. But sometimes I literally will like take a book and try to write it down, or like create something that helps me feel connected to something that I'm trying to learn. So therapist, learning how you learn, and coach.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Gigi. Next question is, how do you battle imposter syndrome when applying to jobs that you might be missing 1 or 2 bullet points on the JD?
I feel like some of us will have some strong thoughts here, so I'm going to chime in real quick. I think these bullet points are a wish list, right? There might be 8 bullet points, you hit 6 of them, but maybe you have a couple of your own bullet points that either they didn't know they were looking for or they didn't know to write down on the page. So I would say, like, don't hesitate, apply anyway. And yeah, you have your own strengths to bring to the table.
Yes, 1,000 times yes to that. Totally agree. I don't think I could have worded that better myself. I would add to that point, part of the job process, the interview process, is figuring out if you are right for the job or not. And so if you think there's like a few bullets that maybe you're missing, or like Sandi said, some that you have that aren't listed, please, like, especially as a hiring manager who's trying to build a design team, please apply to any job that you think could be good for you and good for the company, good for the team, a place where you can learn as well as contribute, because the reality is the interview process should help you identify whether or not you have the right matching criteria. The job posting isn't going to do that for you.
100% agree with everything you guys have said up until this point. The one thing I would like to add is that when these job descriptions are kind of written for you to not apply, right? They put this long laundry list of things that they would ideally want for someone, but in reality, they don't really know what they want. And the truth is, you could probably have a ton of skills that they would want, or they didn't know that they needed. So please apply. Like people are saying in the chat, don't disqualify yourself. Just don't do it.
Gigi, our resident recruiter.
Say, I gotta say something.
Yes.
I gotta stand up for the recruiting team. So we try to be as thoughtful as we possibly can about crafting job descriptions. It is definitely a wish list. I will give you guys that. But there are definitely skills that are not in the job description that we need, that maybe we haven't even just like thought about. And so I think it's actually pretty helpful to look at job descriptions in like different fields with the same title, or even at different companies, right? Like a job description for a program manager at a startup and then like at a larger company is probably going to look a little bit different. And so knowing also the skills that you have that are transferable for that job are super helpful, and just always apply, right? Like, if you ever have doubt, just apply, right? Like the worst thing that someone can say is no. And then, if you can, definitely ask for feedback in the process.
Thank you, Gigi, for standing up for the recruiting team.
We weren't coming for you though.
It's good to get both perspectives, and that it's 100%. It is always a laundry list. And we love when people really kind of take that initiative to say, you know what, I actually do think I would do a great job. And here's why, and being able to share it in their own experiences. I know we're at the top of the hour, and I really want to thank everyone for these thoughtful questions. They're so thought-provoking. I know that I walk away from this session just feeling very inspired. So hopefully everyone also kind of learns something from this, can take something away and start to apply it to their own life. I want to thank Gigi, Alem, Darwin, Katarina, Dmitri, Temi, Sandi, and Tanner for sharing their thoughts and experiences and being so vulnerable, especially when it comes to navigating imposter syndrome in your career. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Diana or myself. It's just diana@gem.com or natalie@gem.com, and we're happy to answer anything else. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. I will be posting this video within 24 hours. Feel free to come back to blacksandtechnology.net for the link, and we hope to see you at a future event. Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Gym Team.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dennis.
All
Bye.
right, Bye.